So, Xavier?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. First, before starting the talk, I would like to thank the organizer of FSec because they invited me, and it's the first time that I'm attending this conference, and also my first visit in Croatia, which looks to be a nice country. So until now, it's a nice trip. So let's start. It was already a small introduction about myself, but I'm well known under my nickname, which is XMe, almost on Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter. And as the presenter said, I'm a freelancer, a blogger, IC handler. So if you don't know the IC, so the SANS Internet Storm Center is an organization based in the US, which monitors the internet 24 hours a day. And the organization is based on volunteers. And the goal is to keep an eye on what's happening on the internet and to also raise some security awareness, to give advice to people and to report some new vulnerabilities and so on. Different websites, my company, my blog, SANS, of course, Brucon, which is a conference organized in Belgium next month. But basically, besides this description, this is what my family, my friends think that I'm doing every day. I'm hunting, I'm a nice guy and so on. But anyway, I'm this guy. As most of you, I'm doing stupid stuff sometimes, and I'm doing boring stuff and the typical IT-related job. So, why HTTP? I have two kids, and in fact, my kids, they are not going on the internet, they are going on Facebook, they are going on WhatsApp. They don't know what's internet, because today, for many people, the new generation, Facebook is the internet. That's like this. My wife, the first page on my wife's computer is Google, and she always starts to surf using Google. She never types the URL in the search bar of the browser. She types the URL directly in the Google search bar. That's crazy. So regarding HTTP, we can also say that it's almost the same. So HTTP, in fact, it's the new TCP. This quote, I think, is coming from Palo Alto Networks, but I like this because today HTTP is used for almost anything on the internet. You can, of course, browse the internet, surf on website, but you can manage stuff, you can chat, you can also write emails, gmail.com. So how many people are still using email clients and configuring POP3, IMAP server? Yeah, maybe some technical guys, but most regular people, they use webmails. So HTTP is used everywhere. And if it's used everywhere, we can also use HTTP for bad stuff. So if we have a compromised machine, HTTP is used first during the compromisation phase. So we can download payloads over HTTP on the machine. Once the machine has been compromised, we can control the machine and exchange messages with the control center, the C2 or CNC, in two directions. We can also exfiltrate data to another host, and using a remote access tool, we can completely manage the server remotely. Everything all those tasks are based on the HTTP protocol. But you will say, yeah, today we have HTTPS. Will it solve the problem? No, it doesn't solve the problem. When I wrote the slide, the first version of my slides, HTTPS usage is slowly increasing. I removed this word because I see that today, most malwares, a lot of bad stuff happens over HTTPS. But HTTPS remains complex to deploy for the attackers. The attackers, they try to keep simple and stupid stuff, and they try to deploy as soon as possible new samples on servers. And if they compromise a machine, a website, they don't care if the machine if the page are served over HTTP or HTTPS, they just need the files to be available from everywhere. So really, those people, they don't care about HTTPS. If they need to drop a file and to hide the file, they will just use another alternative system like the XOR, and they will XOR the file, so the file is seen as a simple binary file over the internet and will not be detected by antivirus, IDS, and so on. But we have a new player today. Let's Encrypt. So Let's Encrypt, probably most of you know the system, so you can get free certificates in a few minutes. It's very straightforward to configure, quite very easy. But It will not change the way attackers will use HTTPS, because browsers, they are trying to fight against HTTP websites. So starting from October, Chrome will start to flag websites which are not HTTPS as dangerous if you try to submit information using a post. So they try to make the user aware that it's dangerous, but definitively, can you spot the difference using these two websites? On the left, you have the official PayPal webpage, the login page, and on the right side, you have a fake one. And if the window is to, in fact, this domain, you have paypal.com dash with something. So for Mr. Nobody, it's exactly the same. For years, in the media, in the press, we always listen that if you see the small yellow lock, I know if you remember for the oldest people in the room, if you see the yellow small lock in the browser, you are safe. Yeah, that's true. That's not the case definitively. So the idea of the talk was how to get a better understanding about HTTP. How is it HTTP used by the bad guys? Because that's some kind of my motto. It's my email tag signature. It's on my blog. If the enemy leaves a door, you must rush in. So I like the principle of playing active defense. So it means that if somebody comes to me to do some nasty stuff, I will react and see if I can abuse his system and if I can extract useful information to do more research. Between parentheses, normally this kind of stuff is prohibited. You cannot do this in some countries because even scanning a system is prohibited. But the idea is there, really an active response. How to get such kind of information, so to find interesting stuff to research? I have plenty of sources. The first one is Pastebin. I really like Pastebin. I have an account for years. I have a machine scrapping Pastebin 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm scrapping all the pasties and search for interesting stuff based on regular expression. And you can find plenty of interesting information. Plenty. The second one is SpamTrap. I'm the happy owner of multiple domain names for years, more than 10, 15 years. And those domains are present in all the spammer mailing lists over the world. So it means that I received a lot of spam every day. And trust me, I like receiving spam. Because again, I get a lot of data, I get a lot of samples, and of course there is some automation behind the spam, so I'm extracting files automatically, generating statistics and so on. Honeypots, I'm also deploying some honeypots over the world, in Europe, in the US, mainly in Belgium, in my area. And you can also find a lot of attackers and spot them. Being a SANS IC handler, we have a worldwide network of honeypots, so everybody in this room is free to contribute, to deploy a honeypot and to forward to us the data. And also we get some samples provided by our readers. So some people, you submit files, say, oh, by the way, I found this one, could you investigate, could you do some research? And it's also a nice source of information. And finally, just hunting. So hunting, if you find a nice URL, you find something which looks suspicious, don't hesitate to spend some time and to really hunting. You don't know what you're looking for, you don't know what you will find, but you spend some time on the internet and trying to find information. So once I have this information, just the principle that I'm using, so action reaction, so that's the nice formula on top of the slide. From all my honeypots, of course, I get IP addresses, and all those IP addresses are put in a database, and every day I'm scanning the databases. So the map that you see is a map of all the IP addresses which scanned my honeypots, and I scan them. And based on this, I find compromised servers, I find open FTP servers with plenty of nasty file, I find web interface, unprotected web interface, and so on and so on. So that's really a gold mine. And amongst all those information, I try to put more focus for a few months on Webshells. So this is the definition of a Webshell. I just did a copy-paste from the US cert. So basically, a Webshell is usually a single file written in Perl, PHP, .NET, but in this presentation I will focus on PHP. This is a one single file which contains a complete application that helps you to manage a server remotely using a web browser. Basically, you can compare a simple web shell to a file manager. If you remember the Norton commander on NC on Linux, you have the two columns and you can manage files, you can copy them, write them, delete them, create ones and so on. So that's basically the feature of a web shell. But the simple web shell that you can write is this one. This is a web shell. What does it mean? If you pass to the URL the parameter C equals something in PHP, it will be executed on the server. That's the simple web shell that we can create. But they have also plenty of other features. So the most important one, file manipulation, basically it's a file manager. But bad guys added a lot of interesting modules, system command execution. You are on the server, why not have a shell and just execute system commands? Database administration. If you know phpMyAdmin, which is also some kind of web shell, because you can manage stuff using a web browser, you can manage MySQL database using a web shell. Of course, you can use them for nasty stuff. You can scan, you can compromise the server, so you can try to escalate, to do privilege escalation to get root access and so on. And you can also, some funny stuff, do mass mailing, or generate spam campaign and so on. So basically, it's like a Swiss knife. You have plenty of modules that you can use, and it's very, very powerful. Just for the fun, I don't know if a lot of you already saw web shells in the wild or on your servers. If you find some on your servers, you are in a bad situation. Some of them are very simple, like this. Some of them looks very professional, because the interface is nice, a lot of buttons, and very easy to understand. Some of them are quite simple. Some of them are very difficult to read. So you see the buttons that you have here are all the different modules that you can have activate. There are plenty of different features. Some of them, because they are used by script, I call them script kiddies, and it's completely unreadable. I don't know how people can work with a web shell like this. And what's interesting, so I collected a lot of samples. All of those web shells are not very different. This output is just a diff of two different web shells that I found, and this is really the diff of the two web shells. In fact, the guy, they just reuse a web shell, they change the name, they change the default password, which is usually MD5, they change the background color, they put a nice picture and so on, so they just revamp the web shell. So you can have nice picture like you saw in the previous slide, but the feature is exactly the same. And of course, why do we need to reinvent the wheel? This screenshot is coming from Viper. I'm a big fan of the Viper framework to analyze malware. And Viper has your module to use SSDeep to compute, to build a signature of a file and find in the database if there are files which are almost the same. And you see that for one web shell, I have 12 matches, starting from 71% to 71, 54, and so on. So you see that most web shells are a lot of code in common, and they just reinvent the wheel all the time. So what are the protections of a web shell? If you try to go deeper now. So a server is compromised, the guy installs a web shell on the server, but the risk to have this web shell found by another attacker is very high, or by a regular guy, or via a web crawler like a Google bot and so on. So what are the different protections? And then we will start with a lot of stuff that I found. The first one is quite easy, the user agent. In this piece of code, we see that the web shell checks the user agent passed by the browser, and if the user agent contains one of the words Google bot, Slurp, MSN bot, and Yahoo Slurp, Ramble, Yandex, crawler, and so on, it will just return a 404 address. So using this technique, they prevent web crawlers to index their web shells. So if you are looking for, you are trying to use Google Docs to find web shell, you will not be lucky because usually they are not indexed by the crawlers. Another example is some hidden login, or even more, bypass authentication. In this example, first, that's what's nice. Instead of displaying, of having built-in error, they just display a default page coming from GitHub. So the 403 NGINX, the standards page of NGINX. So in this code, what we see, if the attacker would like to access the web shell, use quotation mark login equals the number. If this parameter is passed, the web shell will not display the login page, which is classic login, password, and so on, and it will automatically access to the web interface. So, as I said, all those web shells, most of them have been found on Pastebin, but don't think that they are sent on Pastebin in clear text. Of course, they are obfuscated. Usually, you will have only a dump of data, and they use base64, sometimes ROT13 and gzip deflate to hide the code. That's the standard stuff. In 99% of the time, it's one of those three combinations which is used. But they can also obfuscate using other techniques. They just, instead of writing the simple string, they just convert the string in hexadecimal code. Don't try to read this, but your computer will do this without problem. You can also mix, and then I would like to thank the PHP developers, because PHP is a wonderful development language. You can create variables with random strings, and this variable will be the name of a function, and then you will concatenate different strings to finally generate another one, and the deobfuscation of this one is the same code as previous, gzip inflate, base64 decode, cess03, blah, 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 this parameter. So it's a nice way to obfuscate. So once again, thanks you for PHP to be so permissive in writing shitty code, definitively. They can also inject some random get params. So if you put at the end of your web shell, you put question mark foo equal bar, you will access the web shell. If you don't, you will get a 404 error. That's simple and stupid, but it works. Sometimes, when they compromise the server and they have already an access to put more files, they just create an htaccess file. So htaccess file, .htaccess is a file used by the Apache web server to change on the fly the configuration of the web server. In this case, it's not coming from a web shell, it's coming from a phishing page, but I like the example. In fact, it was a phishing page targeting French people. So it means that if what means the .htaccess file, if you are coming from an ESP called wanadoo.fr, sfr.net, Proxat, Numerica, which are all the big players on the French market, you will get access to the phishing page, otherwise you will get a 403 error. So that's a way to prevent researchers, to prevent people to access the phishing page, because the phishing kit was, for example, targeting France Télécom, EDF, and so on and so on. They can also check your fully qualified domain name. So they do a reverse lookup, and if in your hostname you have Google, SoftLayer, Amazon, Amazon Cloud, DreamHost, NetPilot, and so on, you will be kicked out. Why? Because usually I'm using Amazon Elastic Cloud to run some virtual systems, and there are chances that if an Amazon system is coming to your phishing page, your web shell, it's not a user, it's just a system, an automatic tool, or a researcher doing some stuff. If we can blacklist fully qualified domain name, you can also blacklist IP addresses. So if your IP address is in a list that I redacted, I don't put the list of IP addresses in the slide, you will just get banned. And those lists of IP addresses, usually they contain, first, the country that cannot be targeted. So, for example, if the malicious code targets people from Russia, they will ban the Ukrainian IP addresses, just an example. Or there are blacklists that you can find on the dark web, on forums, containing all the lists of all the antivirus vendors. So people working for an antivirus A, B, or C, if they try to access the web shell, the malicious page, they will get an access denied. The HTTP referrer is also interesting. So if you are not coming from this page if you can also manipulate the HTTP referrer, then you will be granted or access denied to the web page. The goal is first to be sure that you follow a correct path. So in case of an exploit kit, you will get the payload only if you are coming from this page, or you can also put some specific code, some hidden, or at least some kind of flag in the referrer to grant access to the page. It's the same thing with custom HTTP headers. If we create in the HTTP request a X malicious header, we can put, in this case, I put my kill string, then we can generate different behavior and again, give access or deny the access to the page. Fake arguments, I saw a lot of Webshell when they just put fake arguments. So if you don't append something, the access will be denied, so simply. So you need, and even the question mark T4811N=3 is just something random. You just need to provide a fake argument. If you don't provide one, you are just kicked out. Geolocalization, it's another one. So geolocalization, they use a lot of tools like freegeoip.com. I will show you a nice example in a few minutes about another one. So the goal is just to restrict access, to grant access based on the country. So if you target people in Croatia, you will only grant access to people coming from Croatia, so simply. Also, why keep all the data on your web server? Because you can maybe blacklist some stuff, you can pass via proxies and so on. So this is an example of code that I found in many Webshells. Webshells include features to install other tools, so you can deploy more tools when you get access to a Webshell. And all those tools, usually they are stored on pastebin. I did not obfuscate the URL because, okay, I consider pastebin is public, so all those URLs are public, so you can find them. It just contains shitty code with more backdoors, more web shells, and so on. This one is a nice example. In the beginning of the talk, I said that the bad guys, they don't care about HTTPS because it's boring to deploy HTTPS. You need to generate a certificate, to reconfigure your server, and so on. But if you compromise a server which is not HTTPS enabled, you can still need some privacy, between quotes, and encrypt your traffic. So there is a very nice project which is not malicious. It was a project of a researcher. It's on GitHub. It's called Nitrido. And using a simple backdoor, you can just encrypt and decrypt your traffic between the web shell and your browser on the fly. So every request, HTTP request that you will send will be encrypted. It's very nice. Have a look, it will be on the slide, so it's a good way to learn how the encryption is working without HTTPS. So, if you want to play, 4 recommendations, if you would like to investigate some time in trying to find web shells and investigating code, first use a DSL line, so an anonymous internet connection. Never use IP connectivity from your corporate network, your corporate proxy, and so on. It's better to use a multi-exit node VPN provider. So you can test the web shell from different countries. You start a VPN session with the endpoint in the US, you access the web shell, you stop it, you access the same page from Croatia, you will get maybe different results. Could be interesting. It's the same with user agent. Try to access the web shell using a normal browser, try to access the web shell using a mobile browser user agent. You will see maybe differences. And generate interesting referrals. What happens if you come from Google? What happens if you come from another website, from a newspaper, something like that? You can maybe find interesting stuff. So, all the examples that I gave here are nice because they explain how people, the bad guys, try to protect themselves. But in fact, people, the bad guys, are human, so they also make mistakes, like everybody. So, my lab, just to explain how I worked, when I download the web shell, it's just executed in a sandbox on a separate, dedicated infrastructure using a wild internet connectivity. in front of between the internet and my LAMP server, I have an EDS, very important, full packet capture, so I can capture all the communications between the web shell and the CNC or the user. And it's interesting to have a Kali system, because I'm a big fan of Burp Suite, and using Burp Suite you can modify on the fly the HTTP request, add some arguments, remove them, change them, do some automation and so on. So the methodology is you collect, you deploy in the lab, you do a quick scan, you do some code review. I'm not a reviewer, so I hate to do this, so don't ask me to do code review, it's not my cup of tea. Do manual test, and of course full packet captures. So one word about automatic scanning. It's tempting when you see a web shell to start using Burp Suite, name your best web scanner, it's tempting to scan it. Usually it's completely useful because the web shell by default, by behavior, allows file inclusion, it uses PHP code injection, it allows directory traversal, code execution and so on, so we will get a lot of false positive coming from your web scanner, so don't try this, it's completely, you will lose your time. But some tips, so work in the sandbox, do not use a corporate computer. If you don't want to connect to the internet, you can use InetSim, which is a tool which simulates internet services. You can simulate a web browser, FTP server, mail server, and so on, and abuse the snapshot of your hypervisor. So you snapshot, you test, you revert, snapshot all the time. So what did I find? This is just for the fun, but developers of Webshell, they also use deprecated functions, so you get some nice warning from time to time. This guy is using the old MySQL API in PHP. Okay, nothing special, but it's just funny to find. Directory indexing. When they compromise a server, usually they forget or they don't protect properly the web server. So it means that the dot reflex is when I'm visiting a website, if I'm finding URL blah 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 /directory /file, I always have the reflex to go back, to go up one directory to see if some files are available. And sometimes you are lucky. So in this case, I found it was the panel of a CNC server. And what's nice is that the guy, to deploy the stuff, they just copy a zip file, and usually the zip file remain on the server, so you can just download the zip file, and you have a copy of all the web shell, all the CNC files locally. You can deploy it on your VM and start the analysis. This one has nothing to do with a web shell, but I found this on the internet. I found the example very lucky. It's a very, very bad behavior. The user creation on the panel, a web panel, I don't know if you can read the message, but the message says the error is password is being used by this user, please choose another password. No comment, but I had to put this slide in my presentation because it's very, very bad coding. Of course, you can find a lot of classic vulnerabilities, cross-site scripting, yes, what else? All these, so the cookies, if they use cookies, they are not protected at all. CSRF is available, so that's classic stuff for web testing. I like this one. Usually they don't protect against host header attacks. So what's a host header attack? When you manipulate a get HTTP request and you replace the host by, for example, imavil.com, in fact, if you get a redirect, the redirect will be, the attacker will be sent to your server. So it means that if you manipulate and you replicate the content of the web shell on your home server, the guy will be redirected, and then you can track in and follow exactly what he's doing and so on. That's nice. Of course, we have weak authentication. I saw this. If password equals password, then it works. And just for the fun, I also collected the most passwords seen in all the web shell samples that I downloaded. This is an example. Admin is classic, Jan Cox, Alpha, 5 space, why not? Indo exploit, this is a very active group on the web shell scene, 4WSEC and so on and so on and so on. But basically they provide very big authentication and they don't protect against brute force attacks. So if you don't know the password, you can just start a brute force attack using your best tool, and usually in a few minutes, depending on the speed of your line and the web shell, the web server, you will get the password in no time. But sometimes you even don't have to look for the password because you can just bypass the authentication. So this is a Chinese web interface when normally, so when you log in and you can download some files. In fact, if you access directly the file, you don't have to put the login password. You get access to the file immediately, so you bypass it. Another example of authentication bypass. This one has nothing to do with Webshell, but it's related to MaxMind. So MaxMind.com is a service providing GeoIP geolocalization. So using an API, you send a request to the service, and based on your IP address, they will just reply with a TXT file containing your country, your city, and some other information. And by default, if you do a simple wget, you received a 401 unauthorized with a nice message, user password authentication failed. But if you do the same HTTP query, so the second one, and you put as referrer maxmind.com and so on, then you will get access to the file. So just based on the referrer, they don't do authentication, and you are free to use the API every time. This has been fixed, so don't try this because it doesn't work anymore. You can also have nice authentication parameters just put in the GET request, classic stuff. So you have access to Webshell, and then you have user equals and user pass equals blah blah blah. Stupid, because it will be in the clear, in the wild. This kind of query will be locked in proxies, locked in the web server log files and so on. So it's completely stupid. This one is nice. Usually when you have a phishing page or you have a web shell, the people, they like also to keep data because they need to collect some information about the visitors. And usually they create a file on the file system. But if they forgot to protect the web server, you can go to the file index, and the visitor.txt file on this example, which is a real one, contained, the format was email, file name, IP address, and contains 12,000 lines of potential victims. It was found in the wild. So from time to time, you're lucky and you can find juicy information. Tracking the bad guys, to finish the presentation, I still have 2 minutes. Two interesting trick. The first one, a few months ago, I detected on my, so I have a blog. I'm writing wrap-ups on my blog. I have a lot of articles and so on, so a lot of traffic, but I'm always keeping an eye on what's happening on my server. And one day I saw that a lot of web servers were requesting a specific image, which is this one. So in fact, this image, I made it because I was in Black Cat in Amsterdam, so that's the Netherlands flag with a black cat. But in fact, this, if you reduce this, it looks like the Indonesian flag also. And I detected that, so a lot of websites were requesting this file, and after some investigation, I saw that bad guys, so they just were busy to deface a lot of websites, and they put in Favicon a link to my picture. Of course, I started to track them, and I found plenty of compromised websites. And in the code, you just saw this. They put a link to the Favicon directly to my blog. So based on this, what's nice, because I got a lot of hits, I was able to detect the compromised website. I was able to see when the website was compromised for the first time, if the website was popular or not, based on the traffic, if the website was quickly recovered, or if the website was left defaced for weeks. I was also able to see the activity of this group. Is this group very active in defacing more and more websites? Also, it was a funny example. If you need more information, you can search on the IC website. I wrote a blog post about this. Another one, some bad guys, they try to attack all the bad guys, of course, because don't forget that internet is the wild. So, nice example that we found, RC Shell is a very nice web shell. When you look at the interface, it's very professional, it's nice, it's clean, and it has also a lot of features. And when you see this, you have many system administrators who can be tempted by installing and using this kind of interface. Some people hate command line tools, so they prefer to use a browser, or maybe they don't have the time to learn command line, they are too old, or I don't know, whatever. But they are tempted to install this kind of tool. Really, it's nice. If you can manage your files on the server, do your backups, copy, and so on, why not? But in this file, usually so this file is quite professional, so it means that for every file type, they have included in the code small images in PNG format, base64 encoded, which represent all the icons for a Word document, a PDF document, and so on and so on. And one of the files, of course, you have an unknown icon, which is base64 encoded. And when you decode this one, if you use the tool tweak.png it's a Windows tool, in fact, in PNG files, you have a lot of metadata, and one of the chunk is called text, and it's just a free space where people can put information about the PNG in the metadata. And of course, in this text chunk, you had a bunch of data, which is almost unreadable. And in the web shell, you had a nice function, Z8T, which in fact run the backdoors, decodes the content of the text chunk in the PNG file, and does this exfiltration. Every time you connect to the web shell, an HTTP post is sent to this host name, and a mail is sent to this email address. I put the name of the guy and the URL because I don't know it's still active at the moment. This is the information that is sent via email. So you get almost everything. The URL of your web shell, the version, user, password, all the default variable, your PHP environment, version, and so on and so on and so on. So I had the idea, of course, if the guy received a mail like this, of course the guy will be tempted to check and to come on the web shell. So I created a honeypot. I sent a mail to the guy, say, okay, I installed RC shell, this is the information. I waited a few weeks, but unfortunately the guy never came to me. So I tried, but it was not successful. I found a few days ago, in fact, another guy made a study about web shells. I was not aware about this. You have the URL below. And in fact, he also analyzed a lot of web shells and detected that most of them are compromised. So most of them contain backdoors. So the three types of malicious activity, you have authentication bypass. More than 7% of the tested web shell have authentication bypass. Home phoning, which means that they just call back to a CNC server, 13% of them, or other server-side malicious activity. So they do nasty stuff behind the scene and they try to do more than expected. So my conclusion is really, don't install a web shell on your production server. Never, 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 because you are never sure that they don't contain a backdoor, they don't do nasty stuff behind you and so on. So that's the end of my presentation. Yes. If you still have questions, I'm present today until tomorrow morning. Well, tomorrow morning I will leave very early, but feel free to come back to me. You have my email address, Twitter account. Anyway, if you have questions, I'm open to questions. Thank you. Yes.
Reported on using DNS tunneling for CNC traffic and different things, not so much web shells. Do you know of any example where it was used in a larger scale attack?
Yes and no. Usually web shells are deployed by script kiddies. So there is nothing malicious there because it's just the installation of a web shell, so the compromisation of the server installation is fully automatic. Because you just have bots scanning the internet all the time. They found the vulnerability. Usually it's on a very nice CMS, you know, WordPress, for example. They find a vulnerable plugin, writable directory, they inject the web shell, it's done, and so the server is available. The next step, they will use the web shell to do more nasty stuff, like sending spam, install other bots, and so on. So I never so it's always in the wild, but I never saw a very dedicated attacks on using this kind of technology. No. It's really, it's a common way to compromise a server. It's a very common tool. Because on Pastebin, at the moment, I think I'm finding between 3 and 5 new web shells every day. So it's, but more, as I said, most of them are always the same, so they reuse the code. It's always, I say, classic stuff, but it's a common way to compromise a server.
Thank you.
Another question? No? So, thank you very much.